Welcome to Speak Our Mind community podcast, sharing the views and opinions of local residents in Camden.
Ready? Yeah. I can call that is giggling.
Yeah, not COVID.
No, not COVID, no.
So my name is Seal. I live in Camden. I have 2 kids, and I run my own business doing PR. But I also volunteer with a charity called Pregnant and Screwed, another charity called Drive Forward, and Rocking Your Teens.
I am Tally. I'm also a local mum of 2 smalls. One that was actually born, I think, 2 weeks before we went into first lockdown. So that was, something to talk about. I am a doula and hypnobirthing teacher, so I support a lot of local and not local pregnant people as they navigate pregnancy and birth, which has also been quite eye-opening during the pandemic, because the way things have changed is quite interesting.
Okay, so cut this out. Hi, my name is Halima. I live quite locally as well. I live in Good Street. I work for the NHS. I'm a Bengali interpreter. I work in hospitals and clinics, everything to do with health. Been working for a long time actually. I also used to work in the head office of CNWL, NHS. Also a diabetes educator. During the lockdown, I have a son. I almost forget him because he's so grown up. He's so grown up, I almost forget him. He's quite grown up. Living in Camden all my life really. During the pandemic, I don't know if I can say this, but life was very difficult for me because I was going through depression, anxiety. Just before, during the lockdown actually, Mum was diagnosed with cancer. She had lung cancer and ovarian cancer. She died last year, November. But during the lockdown, it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult for me, for all of us actually, all our siblings, because I couldn't see my mum. If I wanted to see her for about 6 months last year, I couldn't see Mum before she died, because number one, it was instructed clearly by our doctors that we couldn't go inside the house because she was very vulnerable, and just to protect the other members of the family. So often what we will do, we'll go to my mum's house. She lives in Bournemouth and I live in Good Street, Camden. Just wait outside the house for about half an hour, 1 hour. I used to go with my friend, sitting outside. See Mum for about half an hour outside. Couldn't see her. It was very, very difficult. And year before that, I lost my dad as well. He died in Bangladesh and we didn't see him. So life was very difficult. I had to, because I was suffering from depression. After my mum got diagnosed with cancer, I got separated from my husband. Lots of family issues. It didn't help me at all. I was suffering from insomnia at the same time as well. It was really bad. Couldn't see anybody, couldn't see my GP. I was appointed to see a psychologist. Couldn't see her. I had to wait 8 months. When I finally got to see her, the meetings were held via Zoom. I actually didn't like that. It didn't help me with my depression and anxiety. It got so bad. It actually got worse to a point where I felt as if I couldn't cope. It was hard because we couldn't meet anybody. My family, I have a sister lives quite close by. I'm saying a lot. I couldn't see her. We couldn't go to each other's houses. I couldn't see my friends. Only have a couple of friends. I couldn't see them. So literally just home, not going anywhere, became more depressed. It's only until 3 months ago, it got to a point I was so depressed. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I wasn't functioning at all. So then I went to Bangladesh just to have a break. And that break did me a lot of good.
Yeah.
A lot of good, yeah.
Gosh.
But it was bad. It was actually really bad. I can't find enough words to actually explain how traumatizing it was for me.
Yeah.
Because I was suffering from depression at the same time in separation, and lost my job as well. So I work for HR, head office in CNWL. Lost my job. Father died, lost my job. Mum was diagnosed with cancer, then she passed away. Got divorced as well.
I think because we were so separated from everybody during every lockdown. I don't even know what lockdown we were on now. Like, it's really hard to see or empathise with what people have gone through, because everyone was so, like, you've sort of missed like a year and a half of a lot of people's lives, so you have no idea what has gone through that year for them. And it feels like everyone's so happy to come out of it that there's no, I know it kind of feels like with my friends, there's potentially not such truthful conversations about how it was hard, and because everyone wants to put on a brave face constantly, I think not seeing people it makes you realise how important that human connection is. So you can have your friends there, like, helping you, and seeing that actually you're normally quite like upbeat and happy, and you're not at the moment, and they can help you pull you out of it. But if there's no one around, there's none of that help.
Yeah, I also think there's a cultural aspect as well. You're from Bangladesh, and not being able to see your family, and in other cultures,
True.
That this is so valuable. It's, in our family, we see each other several times a week, and that's how we are. And not having that network is really hard. So,
Devastating, actually. It was devastating. Yeah.
But
I mean,
you're so brave talking about it. I don't know if I would have come out with that within 5 minutes.
It's just that because there's a lot that happened, and like I said, this is my best friend who's sitting outside. I see her. Sometimes I would see her like 3 times a day, because we worked quite close by, and I've known her for 16 years. She's one friend who I'm really, really close to. She's more than a sister. I didn't see her. I didn't see her for one whole year. I didn't see her properly. It was, excuse me if I break down crying, but it was very difficult for me. It was very, very hard, because I wanted to talk to at least my GP. I wanted to see because it's different when you go and see your GP face to face. It's completely different from, it's not like all over the phone. They only have 5 minutes to talk to you about.
And they can't read you. You could be telling them that you're absolutely fine, and you're there breaking down on the phone, but they can't read that.
I think because I couldn't see my friends. One lives in Wood Green and she lives in Clinton. I couldn't see them at all, and that really, really, I came to a breaking point, to be honest. I came to a breaking point where I thought that I was losing it. I wasn't sleeping days, nights. I wasn't sleeping. I kept on working, because that's the only thing that kept me going, because I work for the NHS. So that kept me going. It was hard.
And do you think not seeing your friends maybe halted you getting help?
Yes, it did. Certainly did. Yes. And finally, like I said, when I finally did get around to see my psychologist, therapist as well, I was meant to be seeing quite a lot of people, because obviously there's 3 kind of bereavements: my mum, my dad, losing my job, and this lockdown didn't help at all. Losing my job was a big blow to me. Just 2 months before, my mum was diagnosed with cancer. I had lost my job, and then 2 months later, mum was diagnosed, and then she was only given like about 3-4 months. And I was really close to my mum. We were 7 siblings, but I was very, very close to my mum, and I couldn't see her. That really, really affected me, even till now, to this day. I'm still grieving. I don't think I'll ever get over this, because the fact that it's not like I feel guilty. It's not my fault. It's nothing. It was beyond everybody's control. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't see my mum. I couldn't hold her. We couldn't even hug mum. When we finally did manage to go inside the house, she died in last year, November, but we managed to go in September last year. So we only had 2 months with her, but we weren't allowed to hold her, hug her, kiss her. We couldn't do anything. That was heartbreaking.
I feel like it's stolen time, isn't it? It's like there's this whole period of our lives.
Stolen time.
Stolen.
I agree.
Like, I feel like that with having my son. It was like, with my daughter, I suffered quite badly with postnatal anxiety. So in my head, like this second time, it was going to be, I knew the signs. Like, I worked with, I was more in the birth world, and I was like, this isn't going to happen again. And I felt so angry that like this normal sort of year of you know, showing off my baby was like, I felt like I was obviously it's not a grieving like a death, but it was like I was grieving for an experience that I had put my heart on to heal my previous sort of pregnancy, like previous maternity experience. And you know, I'd geared myself, prepared myself for having, you know, this being strong, and then it was like, oh my goodness, like
I can imagine.
totally just like you sort of, I don't know, you can't even put words into it, can you? And
Sure.
my son was quite poorly. He had to spend a bit of time in Great Ormond Street when he was a few weeks old, so it was like dealing with that, and you've got no one around you like that support you. Like we see my family a lot, and I just didn't realise how much you rely on them for that emotional love, support, you know, pep talking, you know, cheerleading, hugging, you know, that touch is so important.
Yes, it is.
And you've got someone on the phone going, it's going to be okay, and you're like, I'm in this room by myself, I'm like, there's no one else is allowed, and like all of this stuff. And yeah, you realise, I think what was good that came out of it is you do really realise what is important. And for me it was like that family life, really. Like, I don't think I could ever move out of Camden now. My family, most of my family live in Camden. I'm like, always had these dreams of living by the sea and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't think I can do that, because I would miss them so much.
Yes, of course, I agree.
Yeah.
And when he was at Great Ormond Street, were you both allowed to see him?
No.
So he was left there, but he was there by
I
himself.
was there, so he was 3 weeks old. We were sort of, at this point, none of the midwife appointments were coming to your house, so I had to, and they weren't seeing, I was calling up for help, and they weren't seeing people, basically. And I finally got an appointment where the midwife would see me, because I was like, there's something wrong. And she said, go straight to A&E, and it was at the point where they were having, clean and dirty. So obviously we had no symptoms of COVID, so we were in the clean ward. And when they figured out what was wrong with him and knew that we would have to transfer to Great Ormond Street, my husband was in the car park waiting to find out what was going on, and they let him come in and see him, and then we were taken in ambulance to Great Ormond Street, and then he wasn't allowed to see him for 5 or 6 days, and he was 3 weeks old. And then also for me, it was like I'd never been away from my daughter that long, and it was like there was no preparing for it. It was like, you have to go now, and she can't come and see you or say goodbye or whatever. So I think she was in shock, because
How old's your daughter?
she's 4 now, so she was 3,
She was 3 and a
2 and a bit, yeah.
I think,
I
I think with so much of this is what's going to happen afterwards. Like,
yeah,
you know, you've got the period of time that we've now left, and it's now this period. I think it's going to be really telling. I did quite a lot of work on the Button Up Maternity campaign, and it was when we had one woman who was diagnosed with PTSD. It was like, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to have people who have PTSD from birthing alone, from having to look after kids in NICU, alone without their partner, people who've had to, you know, leave loved ones and, you know, leave them dying alone. You know, there's a huge aftermath, and I think we haven't even scratched the surface.
We haven't scratched the surface.
You know, it's interesting. I was having a conversation last week with a therapist, and she was saying to me that grief is just a trigger, and it just get things rolling. So it can be big things and it can be small things, and you know, obviously you've had huge things happen to you, and that grief is going to be really hard to deal with, and you will never get over it, and there is no getting over it. It's how we move forward, and you know, as we move forward as well as a society, I think that we will discover so much grief. You know, grief over people, but also grief over ourselves. And you know, we were speaking the other day about how much, you know, when you become a parent, it's really difficult anyway. And then you're grieving over the person that you were, because we were shut down overnight, weren't we?
Yeah.
And we just had to, you know, whoever you were as a person, if you were social, if you were anything else, you just had to just leave that all behind and become this hermit.
I feel like the best way to describe it was like, you know, that magic trick where there's a table and a tablecloth and there's stuff on it and someone's just gone like, and there's some stuff that's standing and there's some stuff that's not, and I feel like that's where we are now, you know. And yeah, I think you're right. The hangover of it is going to be huge, you know, and we're still, you know, obviously we both work sort of within maternity sort of stuff, and you know, not a lot has changed. It's changed for a lot of people, you know. You can go out and you can go to clubs, you can go to pubs, but you know, parents are still being denied witnessing, being supported during their birth, you know, a lot of, you know, and that's going to have an adverse effect on their bonding as parents, and you're going to see this PTSD, you're going to see this postnatal depression, you're going to see anxiety, and depression, you know, it's going to be huge, sadly, and you know, and the intervention that's happening in those births, you know, because I think people are scared of having people in the hospital for too long, and you know. You know, things are being suggested when they wouldn't normally be suggested, you know.
What used to really get to me, because when I used to walk to work, because I never used to go on the buses, the clinic I work in is quite within walking distance. But what I realise is sometimes, some days I'll just notice that there isn't anyone around me. Yeah. And that affected me. I don't know about anyone else, but with people's person, I'm a people's person, and we all are. We're all interconnected in some way. So walking in the streets, it was actually... used to make me really upset.
Well, I think in London especially,
not seeing a normal crowd, and I live in a very crowded place.
Yeah,
I live near UCH.
It felt like everyone exited London. Like obviously you've got Londoners. Like I would say we're Londoners, and we live here. But you know, there's a lot of people that had the option of escaping, and it felt like that happened. And it was just, for me, being outside made me panic, because I felt like. So we had to shield for a little bit as well. So we weren't going out that often, but when we did, it was like, what have I brought my son in? Like I felt like, what have I brought my son into? Like obviously we were pregnant way before the pandemic started. Like we went into lockdown 2 weeks after he was born. But it felt like, how have I brought him into this world? And I started to feel really sad and like, you know, what have we done? Like, what is this going to be like for him? You know, he's not going to have those bonding experiences. We weren't parenting particularly well because my husband's self-employed and all of his work stopped. I was on maternity leave, so there was like financial stress. And you're not parenting to your full ability, are you? When you're in that position. And I think... yeah, it was nice because my husband could be around for like a year of my son's life that he never would have done if it hadn't have happened. But still, I look back and think, what damage have we done to them by being so anxious and stressed, and you know, talking about the germs, talking about, you know, people dying, you know, what they absorb. It freaks me out that what are they going to remember. Like, I don't think my son will remember he won't remember anything, but like, you know, I don't know about you, but with Archer, she was like acting out hospital and like things like that, which really freaked me out, like, because that's all she's hearing about is like ill people dying, you know, and you just think, what is going on in their heads?
I also think people are also really hostile. So, you know, I think Camden was really quite a friendly place, and then with the lockdowns and with, you know, coronavirus, people become really hostile. You know, you're walking around like as if you
Do you think it's fear though? Do you think it's how fear sort of
I think it's
transpires?
I don't want to bring politics into it too much, but it's the language and the decisive language of politics that have made everyone react to each other in the same way, as if, you know, you're going to personally be the one that puts me down. And it's become a bit of a fight or flight, and that I find that really exhausting, because I'm a people person too, and, you know, not being able to walk down the street and say...
Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes of Speak Our Minds podcast.